Hello and welcome to Tattered Cover virtual event series. My name is Adam and I am the director of events with Tattered Cover. So thank you to everyone out there joining us in virtual land. I just want to say, if you don't know, Tattered Cover is Denver's largest independent bookstore. We have been around for 50 years, and it's thanks to readers like you and the authors we have tonight who have kept us going. So thank you for supporting us for half a century. We hope to see you in another half century. Before I go any further, there is closed captioning at the bottom of your YouTube screen. There's a button that says CC. You can go in and click that, and that'll get closed captioning if you want it or need it. Tonight we have, before I introduce tonight's guest, please go to tatteredcover.com. I always forget to say that, but I'll say it now, tatteredcover.com/event for more author events. We're continuing to do virtual events to keep everyone safe and socially distanced. So please check out tatteredcover.com/events. Tonight, we have Michelle Ruiz Keil, who will be discussing her new book in conversation with Samantha Mabry. Michelle Ruiz Keil is a writer and tarot reader with an eye for the enchanted and a way with animals. Her critically acclaimed debut novel, All of Us with Wings, was called A Transcendent Journey by the New York Times and a fantastic ode to the Golden City's post-punk era by Entertainment Weekly. That was released in 2019. She is here to discuss her new book, which I just lost the title of, so I apologize. My computer is freezing. I will get it. Her new novel, thank you for bearing with me, is Summer. Oh, sorry, Michelle, I'm sorry. I just lost my notes. I will get to it. I'll let you introduce your book. In conversation with her, that has never happened to me, is Samantha Mabry. She credits her tendency towards magical thinking to her grandmother, Garcia, who would wash money in the kitchen sink to rinse off the bad spirits. She teaches writing and Latino literature at a community college in Dallas, where she lives with her husband, a historian, and a cat named Mouse. She's the author of A Fierce and Subtle Poison and All the Winds in the World. Please welcome Michelle Ruiz Keil and Samantha Mabry. Awesome. Welcome. There you are. Michelle, I'm so sorry. I have my notes right in front of me and I forgot the title of your book, and that's never happened. Please tell us what the title of your book is.
The title of my book is Summer in the City of Roses. And this is the beautiful cover of it. And I also just want to mention Samantha's latest book because I am so in love with it, which is Tigers Not Daughters, along with the other two, which are, of course, also, favorites of mine. So hi.
Thanks. Hi, we're here. I have never had my tarot read.
Really?
I was thinking about that. I don't know why. I feel like when someone says that they're a tarot reader, then everyone's like, "Will you read my cards?" I feel like it's like a immediate invitation, and so I didn't want to be a burden to anybody.
Well, so I'll read your cards anytime, just so you know. Yeah. It's not a burden to me. It's a funny thing, actually, because I'm one of those people who, if I have to give someone a massage, I can do it really well, but it really exhausts me completely. But when I'm doing tarot readings, it energizes me weirdly. Wow. So I'm not even sure really why that is, but it energizes me, and it kind of lights up that same place in my brain that when you're drafting and things are going really well, lights up. Mm-hmm. So I think, so for me, it's actually really energizing. And sometimes when I'm sort of stuck with writing, I will, if I happen to give someone a reading, it'll unstick me. Not when I read for myself, that's different, but yeah, for someone else, for sure.
There's creativity that goes into it, right? There's some kind of interpretation that you do, some kind of storytelling aspect with
it. Absolutely storytelling. Okay. So basically it's I've, learned the cards so long ago and that I know the symbolism so well. So it's really a symbolic alphabet. It's a symbolic language. So now that I understand that language so clearly, when I look at the cards, I can see a story is laid out. It's laying out a story. There's kind of beginning, middle, and end. It's really narrative. But also there is a spark of intuition involved, though, too. And I don't think it's anything necessarily mystical. I just think that I have a good feeling for people, and I can sort of know, because I could get the same card layout for one person and it would be completely different reading than for another person. So there's something there, too, about just intuition, or maybe I don't know, and like empathicness. I'm not really sure, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all very interesting.
Yeah.
So we're here, we're just talking to each other for a little while, and I have a couple of little questions so we can just sort of go wherever it takes us. And then um, Adam, I don't think mentioned this, but everyone who's watching can drop comments. I think through YouTube, he said where it's going, and then he will pull those out and put those in the chat for later. And so if you have questions for Michelle, I'd be happy to. Oh, Adam says, yes, he let them know. Okay, we got it. We'll get to those. So please just anytime you can drop those in there and they'll be there and we'll get them later. When I was thinking of what to talk about, I was thinking about how we are like very similar. Like we have really similar sensibilities, I think, a lot of times in our writing. So the questions that I was going to ask you was like I could talk about for a long time too, you know?
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about retelling or like having an inspiration. So, you know, some of my debut novel was like what I thought was going to be like a really strict retelling of a Nathaniel Hawthorne short story called Rappaccini's Daughter. And then it got like looser and looser. And then I refer to it sort of as like a reimagining now, or just like inspired by. And, you know, my second and third novels, yes, were inspired by things. And I always mention them in my acknowledgments because I don't want anyone to think that like, oh, this sounds a lot like this story.
Right.
And like,
oh, like you didn't do it on purpose.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, so this can get you just started about what Summer in the City of Roses is kind of based on. And, you know, when you decide to do something like that, do you eventually, like I do sometimes, regret it? Because you're like, oh, or does it really like kind of keep inspiring you all the way through the process?
Well, okay. So basically, I know that I can't have rules about it, or it can like actually, okay, but that book, I did not regret it. I'm working on something else now that I'm rethinking, because it's a whole, it's like a novel and stories of retellings, and I'm just like I'm just trying to reinterrogate why I'm using fairy tale the way that I am, just to make sure it doesn't like become my thing that I just do. But with Summer in the City of Roses, I didn't regret it, but I also, because it's such a mashup, I could pick things from it and things from Iphigenia and Orestes. There's also stuff about sort of the deer dance. There's like a spring sort of ceremony and deer dance for northern Mexico and like in the Southwest as well. That kind of and it's kind of a Christianity and indigenous mashup that I also got some inspiration from, just because it's about a boy who becomes a deer and leads the people to the land of the flowers where we can speak with the animals. So I was just like, well, that's a place I'd like to go. And I was also just trying to find, I think too, because like I was just teaching last week and I found myself saying that we were talking about decolonizing our writing. And I was like, yeah, but I keep using these Western stories, right? I'm using Greek mythology, I'm using fairy tale. And, but then I realized that those stories also have become a portal for me, because I have no real connection with, you know, with sort of my Mexican cultural stories, like not really, and definitely none from my Colombian family. So my Mexican family has, you know, been in the United States forever. They're very assimilated, and that was the goal. And so sometimes the Grimm story or the Greek story is a portal for me to find, like for instance, the deer boy story, and also like some Aztec mythology that kind of guided me deeper into my first book as well. So I think that these stories are just more like kind of like guideposts, or like helper, like kind of companions, rather than the rules. So that helps.
Right. I have this what you were talking about reminded me is like I have a like really true love of Westerns, like true Westerns, like John Wayne Westerns, like Western novels like Lonesome Dove. And I just love them, even though when I rewatch them, I'm like, oh, like they're so tacky in places, you know?
Yeah.
But I always want to do something in that genre. You know, like I always want to sort of like find my place in that. And I don't want to say like make it better because that's sort of not the goal, but like make it more inclusive or show it from some kind of different angle.
Yeah.
It's like it has to do with, well, like we can talk about this too, but it has to do with we both really like place. Like we're both, I think, really specific about where we set our novels. And I remember I was on a panel with someone who was saying that she felt, she probably didn't say it this way, but this is how I heard it, right? She felt that like place wasn't important and that the plot of her novels could be anywhere and in like any time, and they would be like timeless and placeless, and then that was really important to her. And I was like, no way. Like I just couldn't even believe it. Because I know this novel is set in Portland, and then your last novel is San Francisco. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, when I'm asked at panels if I start with plot or character, I often say I start with place. Like I often sort of have to have a place in my mind. And I'm wondering how, you know, when do you have a sense of place, or do you sort of get a sense of place first?
Place is first. Place has to be first. I need to know where. And I think that's kind of a problem with something I'm writing now, is that I don't know where it is yet. Like I had the characters first, which I never usually do, and the setting even, but not the place. And I need place, because for me, where we are affects the feeling of like it affects the language that I use. Like I noticed that my writing was a little different when I'm writing about Portland, and like the feel is different and the pace is different, like everything, like this, like the scope, like it feels a little closer, a little smaller, a little more hugged in, the way that Portland feels compared to San Francisco. You know what I mean? Like it's just, yeah, I gotta have place. Otherwise I'm all over the place. And actually, thank you for saying that, because it reminds me that's what I need to do, I think, to figure out the other thing, because it's just kind of, I don't trust it. It feels weird. I think it's because it doesn't have a home.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. It's when we've been on panels together about magical realism specifically, and I think about it in terms, I've said it before, a container. Like yes, like it's not structure so much as like a container, right? And the what makes magical realism different than fantasy or something is like, wait, no, now I'm even like losing my, but like something about like the container.
No, I think so though, because okay, it depends on like where does your magic realism come from, right? So like, for instance, once I got some very kind feedback that I found unhelpful, but it was actually helpful because it helped me understand what I think about what magical realism is for me, like why I'm using it, what it's doing for me in my work. And someone said that more magic would have been, about my first book, more magic would be helpful, because then it would be more clear what genre it was. You know, like the teacups float and this and that happens. And I'm just like, what? Like the teacups can't, why would they float? There's no reason for that. Like, and I guess it was because there's no energy or force animating the teacups for any reason. There weren't in that story that I could find. And yet, like you know, in this novel, in Somewhere in the City of Roses, for instance, you know, the magic realism starts very, very slowly and comes from elements of the place that are already, to me, slightly magical in the first place.
But this is really hard to, I know exactly what you're talking about. I feel like this is very hard to get people to understand what we were talking about.
Yes.
Because when I was drafting All the Wind in the World, like it was, I submitted to my publisher, and they were like, oh, they had a lot of like, it was like a revise and resubmit, and there's a really specific question that I will always remember, which was, what's the locus of the magic? And I was like, the land? Like it seemed very obvious. I was like,
the land,
the dirt, like it was, you know,
the dirt. Yes, yes.
Like, is there like someone's a witch or something? And I was like,
no.
But then I kind of, and I remember saying this, I remember having this comment. Do you know Luis Alberto Urrea?
Yes.
I told him the story like in the line when he was signing a book for me. I was like so agitated.
Yes.
But and I remember thinking, well, I have to do something because it's your editor and you have to like figure something out. And so I made it to where they thought it might be someone. But like in my mind and in the story, it's really not, it's just like a place.
Right. That's really hard. I think it's hard. And I'm hoping that by with having more magic realism in YA, I'm hoping that those requirements or requests become less like that's needed less. I guess I'm hoping that readers can be trusted a little bit more. I was just talking to someone actually from Pal's Books that about how it's really interesting in young adult because we have really just like we have fantasy and we have contemporary, right? And within those, there's science fiction maybe within the fantasy sort of subgenre, like realistic, non-realistic. And it's really hard when you're kind of in the middle there. And for adult fiction, that stuff often falls into literary fiction, but we don't have that. And so, and no one expects you to like make sense there, but there, so I think that it's just been as there's been more sort of maybe I don't know, because a little more inclusivity, I'm not sure, but as more stories like this get published, maybe you won't get asked to have a locus that's not like just the dirt.
I hope. I know. That's really interesting to think about. Like it has to do with like reader expectations or something.
Yes.
Like what like makes sense, and a lot of what I would consider magical realism YA novel or in any kind of magical realism story, there's not the section that's like in the beginning there was a tree and then the tree and then they ate the tree. There's not like the origin story.
There's not. Nope.
And then there's not a wrap up of like, I don't get not to give it away, but at the end of Summer in the City of Roses, there's not like, and everything was fine now.
Right. Like, there's more, there's more ambiguity. And it's really interesting because for some readers, so I mean, I don't think it spoils it to say that the magic realism starts off very tiny and very, very sort of just gentle and sort of here and there, and then sort of ramps up. And there's a switch at a certain point. And I knew that might be challenging for some readers who probably were going to really enjoy the more sort of like historical 90s contemporary, just tour of early 90s Portland, but maybe would be like, whoa, what is she doing? And like, I've really trained myself now not to read reviews, but I did read a few early ones, like reader reviews, just like try to just leave that all. It's not really my business. And I know that, but I did see that. And I realized like, man, that's too bad. Cause like, I don't want to leave those readers behind. I'm glad they like that part of the story. But for me, I mean, it just had to get weird. I can't help it. Like I couldn't help that. Like to me, I don't know if you feel like this, but it's almost like at a certain point, once you get to that middle, it's like, it's just got to go the way it's got to go. Like you can't really fix that exactly.
Right. You just have to.
You can clarify it, but.
Right. You do wish that like, that you could every reply to this, you could be like, I wrote what was in service to the story. Like I wrote, it was not in service to you. It was, it's like, if it makes sense in the story, then the story is a good story. It's not that it just like, threw such a curveball that it doesn't make sense. Like it makes sense
for the story. But for some people, I think too, that sensibility won't make sense. And this is why I think it's like totally fine that like, not every story is for everybody, but I think that it's really interesting when you don't have, like with a contemporary story, I think that you just need to make things that you need to make sure of. Well, in every story, like, does it make emotional sense? Would the people feel this way? Would they say this thing if this thing happened? Like, does it have emotional truth or whatever? And then, does the plot make sense? Do we know what's happening? But also though, like with magic realism, there's another sort of sense making, I think, that comes just like from us and the way that we see the story in the world. And I think that, we're asking readers actually for a lot of trust. Like, trust me, this is just what happens in this story.
Yeah. But like, a part of me like was just like, well, that just comes from like setting and tone, which is my two favorite things.
Yeah, me too.
It's because like all I could do is write setting and tone, and plot is very hard for me. To
me too. Oh my God.
I could just like write about a tree forever.
Yeah, I could too. I like to write about the tree. Yes.
So another thing that we both kind of have in common, and I did not. I'm trying to think. I didn't steal this from. There's this writer named Tia Obrecht who wrote a book called The Tiger's Wife that is one of the books that like made me want to be a writer. It's outstanding.
Yes.
Right. And she just wrote a new book called Inland, which is a Western.
Oh, that's right. I haven't read that yet.
And she did like an online panel that was like a local Dallas kind of festival thing.
Yeah.
And so I sat in, and then it was Q&A time. And so I asked her this question, and I'm going to sort of like ask you and me, is like, you use animals a lot in surprising and unexpected ways. Why do you do this? And what she said was, because there's also an animal in Inland. It's like a very rapid, and then obviously there's a tiger in The Tiger's Wife. Like,
yes.
And she said, and like I was thinking if I had asked myself that own question, because I have animals all over my books.
Yep.
I don't really know, other than it adds sort of like this like weird magical thing. But she was saying that she does it because of the way that humans put expectations on animals, or like transplant their own sort of emotions on them and make stories around them, like this sort of way that I thought was really interesting. So I'm speaking specifically about, there's birds. You can explain that for your last book, right?
Yeah.
Or the deer, sort of all the animal stuff and
yeah. I mean, for me, it's more about the role that animals have in my life. So I think that if I had a different life, like if I could have a do-over life, like that other different life, I would have it all lead up to me being an animal communication scientist, the ones that figure out like what the birds are saying, because they actually have like, they have a language, they have syntax, they have accents, regional accents, like they have all sorts of things going on, right? And also the dolphins, like I mean that, I want to talk to those guys. And I do spend a lot of my time actually attempting to communicate with the animals around me. Also, like everywhere that I go, I end up having encounters with lots of kinds of animals. Like Portland has so much wildlife, and I see it all the time. For instance, I was kind of dragging my feet to go into sort of promotional book mode, and I was just kind of feeling like a hermit, like a COVID hermit. And I was like, oh, I don't even want to post on the internet. But then I was out on my deck, and I noticed that a young gentleman deer was out in my yard, this beautiful fuzzy antlers. And I look at him, and he just looks up at me for the longest, because he knows I can't get him from up on my deck. He knows like how far it is. And he also knows that I have stuff in my yard he wants, like figs, for instance. So he's just like, he just gave me a long look, and I just thought, all right, I hear you, dear boy. It's time to go do my thing. So, I mean, I have a lot of animal encounters. And so for me, those and those spark my imagination like nothing else. Like I want to know, and I'm so nosy about the animals. Like my kids are always like, Mom, leave them alone. Like where do those birds sleep at night? What are they doing? What's happening? And then they're like, give them a break. Like, no, I must know. So I think that partly just in my imagination, I can sort of satisfy myself about taking it one step further, like where I really can know what's happening, or they really do interact and understand. So yeah, that's why for me.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I remember it was like a publishing event and people were doing like an icebreaker question. And it was like, one was like, well, if you had a superpower, what would it be? And I did not know, I never know the answer to these. And then I remember sitting there and like the conversation had like completely moved on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I said, I would like to know what the birds are saying. And that was like, for real, my superpower would have been. I was like,
totally, right? I mean, just imagine. I mean, you probably can, like, but it would be so great to know. Like, I would like to actually know.
I have a really different sense of animals. I don't know why. I have a sense of like I'm really interested in encroachment and like intrusion and like whose space is this really?
Yes.
Like in Tigers Not Daughters, there's a hyena that escapes from the zoo.
I've been dying to ask you about that hyena. Can you just tell me more about the hyena, please?
I didn't know. So when I was first drafting this book, and it took a really long time, and people would be like, well, what is it about? Right. And I'd be about, it's like three sisters, and the oldest sister dies and comes back to haunt the house. And there's also a hyena in it. Like that's kind of the baseline.
Wow. So you knew the hyena was going to be there.
Yes. Part of it is based on a short story by Tia Obrecht, who we just mentioned.
Yes.
About a hyena. Because I was trying to think of like an animal that was like kind of gross, like it's like unattractive, and the sounds it makes are really very eerie.
Yeah.
And this is the short story. I mean, I think it's called like The Hyena or The Howl or something, about hyena that like steals a child or something.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to be a hyena. I like this idea of this one sister wanting to talk to the animals. Like she had this very desire to like be in tune with nature, so much so that she is like following around this hyena that has escaped from the zoo. At some point she thinks that it's possibly like the spirit of her sister is communicating with her. But I did also very much want it to be like, we don't know if she's actually communicating with us. We don't know if that's really her sister. You know, like, I didn't want that. Again, that's sort of a magical realism me kind of thing to do, which is not to be like
overt. Yeah.
Yes. And so and I knew that there's the scenes are kind of mirrored at the beginning and the end with there's like a car crash scene with a dog and then a similar scene with the hyena. And those just kind of fit really neatly with one another. But I did like this. I mean, and again, I did want an animal that seemed like it could kind of slink through an urban neighborhood, like kind of like a coyote, but it was way more out of place than that.
That was so intense. See, to me, I got the coyote vibe, but I was like, whoa, hyena. Also, female hyenas are more powerful, much more so than the male hyenas, and they are very intense. So just as a feminine symbol and as a symbol for, that's the other thing that I mean, of course, animals have intense symbolism, like just built right in. So if you want to have that sort of mythic, if you want to make connections immediately in people's brains, animals will totally do that for you. And the hyena for me, just like, let me know that this was about like, this was about like something more real about these female characters than we were expecting. Like there was going to be something about their power and something about like the parts of them that are not acceptable too, because like you say, people are freaked out by hyenas. Like I actually really appreciate them now, but I used to think they were kind of like, and they're really portrayed that way. They're demonized kind of. I just thought that was to me, that was like immediately signaling my brain that this was going to be a different sort of story about this set of sisters,
Yeah. Well, great.
Yeah.
I didn't know. No, I didn't know that about female.
Oh yeah.
Hyenas.
Yes. They're very intense.
Right. Yes. And so I did want it to like be a symbol, but not a symbol. Cause I also don't necessarily like animals to be, what's the word? Anthropomorphized.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. because that's why it's just kind of slinking around. And there's like rumors that it like killed a dog, but we don't know. You know, it's not really
Yes.
terrorizing the neighborhood except for like
Yeah.
in this one sister's
Yes.
mind. And then it's not even terrorizing. She just really, really wants to
Yes.
find it.
Yeah.
She's afraid for it, essentially.
Yes, she wants to protect it, which I thought, again, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this book that I'm writing now, it's kind of inspired by this place where I live in West Texas and in the country, and there's feral hogs.
Ooh.
And just all the feral hogs are of Texas, but there's feral hogs in this part of the country. And we were spending a lot of time out there during the early days of the pandemic because it's pretty isolated. And I have a small child, he was 2 at the time. And I remember just like thinking that hogs were everywhere. And they're very vicious. And I wrote a poem. And the first line of it is like, in Texas, it's legal to kill a hog that wanders onto your property. And since you were born, I see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And so like,
wow.
You can shoot hogs. You can kill as many as you want, you know. And I just sort of like, I am invading on their space. They're invading on my space. I will kill them if I see one. Like this weird sort of
well, that's really rich for like a Western too, because isn't that like the basis of Westerns? Really, you know, a lot of them. It's like, whose territory is this?
Yeah. And like
space?
And I was in like survival, you know, still am, but like real in like survival mode. Like you or me.
There's that new mother energy too. I mean, I remember being so relieved when someone gave me Sharon Olds' book, Satan Says, because there was some pretty intense stuff about like new motherhood there. And like just the sort of like dark fear and like just that sense almost of just suddenly like intense vulnerability and like sort of vicious protective. I just had never felt that way before. So I was just like, that reminds me of that too. Just that sort of, I don't know, kind of like in ourselves, that border crossing, you know, that boundary crossing.
Yes.
Changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of, I don't know what spurred, like something that we were talking about just now, of, we get this question a lot about audience, and like, I don't feel like responsible for young people. That's not the kind of writer I am. You know, I'm trying to write stories that are reflective, even if they have magic in them, are reflective of some aspect of real life, and sort of like, you know, do you feel, you know, when you get that question about like, who are you writing for? And I'm always like, I'm writing for some kind of version of myself at that age to like validate the usually sort of anger that I felt at that age. But like, do you have an audience in mind?
I mean, kind of myself at a certain age, for sure. Like with my first book, I really wanted to explore a coming of age story that was about, you know, a young person that was kind of living as an adult, but very young. And what that was like to be the youngest person in a group of young adults that you live with, because you're all on your own and you all kind of have been on your own. Sort of that, I guess it was a world I didn't see a lot, where it was like people who didn't do the thing of like, they finished high school and then they went on to college, and, you know, they sort of did that path. Folks who like just sort of, you know, survived their teenagehood however they could, and then, you know, kind of grew themselves up on their own. And that was, you know, in my life, in my youth in San Francisco, that was a really common path. It wasn't like it was unusual that I was doing it. I found other people who had already done it. And so on some level, we all felt like peers, although they were a lot older than me and a lot more experienced, as I was the young person coming in. So I wanted that like kind of a world. I just hadn't seen it. I didn't actually write, though, the first book with an intention that it was going to be a YA book. I actually wasn't sure. And I first queried it as YA, and I got back some nice responses saying, I think this has to be adult, actually. And so then I queried it as adult, and had much better response much more quickly, and found my agent, who said, yeah, I think this has got to be adult too. So you know, send it out as adult. And my editor wanted to edit it, and brought it back to her publisher, and they said, you can have that, you know, you can do this book, and we don't want to change it, but we're going to put it out through our YA imprint, though, because we think this is actually, you know, YA. And so there I was, kind of in a no man's land of like, I don't know where I'm at. And we didn't change it. I mean, that was the thing about the editor and I. We were like, no, we're writing, we're working on this book like for the book, for the story. And we weren't, like you said, worrying about, who was going to read it. We were just, I was there knowing that there would at least be some young folks that were like me, who would think it was really great to read a story they could relate to. And there might be maybe some slightly older, young folks who went through that recently and would love to read about it. But I mean, so with the second book, I knew it was going to be a young adult book. But once again, like I didn't hold anything back or change the story because of that. Although the characters were younger, even though they were the same age, they were much younger people. They had been parented, and protected, and were still kids. They were still kids. This was their first experience kind of like not being a kid. Whereas in my first book, the character had not been a kid for quite a long time. So yeah, I don't feel totally responsible either,
No.
but I hope that, yeah, I hope that the stories can find the people that understand it.
Yeah, I've never heard a story like that ever about.
Oh, about it not being YA or like not being sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
That
just
was my deal.
or if they would say they come up with something, they'd be like YA with crossover potential, but they were just like, no, but here it is.
Well, I mean, they knew there'd be some crossover potential too,
Right.
and they wanted to push the envelope a little bit. They thought it might, and it did a little. Yeah, it did.
Okay. No, that's super interesting. But yes, there was a question they popped in.
Oh yeah.
With the chat. Let me find it. Oh, this is a great question. Who or what inspired the cover art for Summer in the City of Roses?
Oh, that's a really great question. The publisher decided they wanted to have the brother on the cover and not the brother and the sister, which I kind of thought they would have. I expected that, but they were really adamant that they wanted just the brother. And so the artist, they found a really amazing young artist, Maria Gabriela Gonzalez. She goes by Maga Gon, so MAGA.GON. And she is a South American artist and amazing. I feel like so lucky that we found her. But what she wanted was some kind of a reference image. And because the character Orestes Santos Velos is Greek and Mexican, I found some pictures of my husband as a teenager because he's Greek, and then Jeff Buckley, actually, the singer who died young in the 90s, was Greek and Mexican. So I gave a Jeff Buckley picture. I know, I was like, Greek and Mexican men. And there he was. I was like, oh, kind of, yeah, I can see it. And then the other one that I gave, though, was my nephew, who is Irish and Salvadorian, but had kind of a look that I was sort of going for. So I gave all of those to the artist, and honestly, it looks just like my nephew. Like I actually have a picture of them together with the cover. It looks just like my nephew, who is a very beautiful young man, and doesn't and wasn't. I'm like, oh, I hope he's not mad. It looks exactly like him. He wasn't mad. He was like, it's cool. I'm good with it. So yeah, it looks just like him.
Great. This question, we should have anticipated it, and now I'm like blanking, which is, what other YA magical realism can you recommend? Okay, I know one. There's some more.
Yeah.
The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Wilson.
Yes.
Great. It has a really excellent opening section. The kind of like, I don't know what the proper term is, but like when you like condense 100 years of history.
Yes.
Like
compression, right? Compression.
Yeah. Yes. Really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then Anna Marie McLemore writes really lovely
magical realism. Absolutely. It's not a young adult book, but like Water for Chocolate is a really, I mean, I think it's assigned in high schools, and it's by Laura Esquivel, and it's been around, since the 80s. It's a great movie too. It's such a good movie. So funny. But that's wonderful magical realism as well.
Yes, if we're going to it was The House of the Spirits is
Yeah.
is by Isabel Allende. It's just, for me, the gold standard of that.
Yeah, I think that might have been the first magical realism I read, actually, was The House of the Spirits. And then I found, and then the movie Like Water for Chocolate came out, and that will let you know how old I am, because I saw that when it first came out in the theaters, and it was awesome. But the other thing that really got me onto magic realism, and I think that magic realism in film is pretty amazing, and I'll just recommend it to any young person that's out there. It's Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire, which was a big part of my first book and really immersed me in the idea of what you could do with magic realism. It's a hard film to find. It's an art film from the 80s, and but it is beautiful, and it really changed my life when I saw it. I think I saw it when I was 18. So yeah, there's a lot of great magic realism in film too. Also, The Secret of Roan Inish, which is kind of more like a fairy tale, like a fable, but also really beautiful.
I've written like that. Whenever my books come out, people ask me to write blog posts about like your favorite magical realism, and I'm like, now I'm just like, oh, I guess.
I know. That always happens to me when, like, yeah, it does, when you're like put on the spot. You're like, what? I don't know.
Okay. What advice can you give to a young writer who wants to start telling stories?
That's so interesting that you asked, because I just spent a week in Seattle teaching for this amazing nonprofit called Young Women Empowered. And we did a speculative fiction kind of day camp every day for 8 days, and outside in this beautiful backyard. And so I guess I'll tell you what I told them, which is pay attention to the things that you love, that really interest you, the things that fascinate you, that you're super excited about, that you think about a lot, that you're drawn to, because all of those things are probably the things that will keep you going to write about. Read a lot, like read and read and read can really, really help. And then honestly, practice writing, really practice just writing down your stories, just getting them out on paper, playing with what that's like. But I think understanding that the things that you love and that interest you, anything that is a valid subject to write about and will fuel you to be passionate enough to write. And I say that because I found that a lot of the young writers that I was working with were shocked to realize how much they enjoyed writing, but previous to our class had only written sort of stuff for school and weren't able to write the things that they loved. And now I have to take a moment for your Siamese cat, which is the best.
She's Tonkinese, which is not.
Oh, yes. Oh, I see. Oh, beautiful. Yes. Yes. You're one of my favorite kinds. Beautiful.
But they're very like in your face, Siamese and Tonkin.
Yeah.
Like,
Need to talk to you a lot. Need to discuss. Need to be. Yes.
Normally I host these events at home. I'm actually in the bookstore today. My cat just like jumps across at like the most inopportune times.
Of course. My dog is actually napping, so she's not, as usual, like in my face too.
Perfect. And well, again, Michelle and Samantha, thank you so much for talking to us here at Tattered Cover. And I have to agree, I looked up the book cover. I had forgotten what it looked like. It is just a great book cover. So amazing.
Really pretty,
and
huh?
Somewhere in the City of Roses. I will never forget the name now. I promise.
Okay.
But where can readers find both of you on the internet? Do you want us on Twitter, Instagram? Where should we find and follow you all?
Instagram more for me. I am on Twitter somewhat, but Instagram more for me. And then my website is just michelleruizkeil.com. And I need to update it, and I'm sorry, and I will soon.
Yes, I've been like trying to delete my Twitter account for like a year, right? So we're not gonna, it's still there, but we won't talk about it. And then Instagram is, I'm Samantha Mabry, Texas. There's some underscores in there. And yes, I'm also SamanthaMabry.com, and it also needs to be updated, but you can find me there.
As we do.
Terrific. And you can find us at tatteredcover.com, where you can buy Summer in the City of Roses, and then Samantha's book, most recent book, Tigers Not Daughters, which is out now in paperback. So thank you everyone who joined us. This YouTube link will be emailed out so you can relive all the magic that Samantha and Michelle talked about. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Michelle and Samantha, so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Cool. We are no longer streaming, even though it says